first and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for coming all the way from England to be with us tonight. How are you feeling?
Tired. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm very glad that the film's going to have a bit of a life here, which is great. Every British indie filmmaker hopes that their film will have a life in the States, so I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to be showing it. One of the things I'd love to start with is a little bit about your process in terms of your inspiration for this specific film. Can you lead us through a little bit about the village and where you grew up? And
well, actually, I've always been based in London, but I moved to this town about 7 years ago. And I'd already written 2 very low-budget feature films that had done relatively well for the standard of the film, for the size of the film. They'd achieved a lot. So myself and the producer thought we'd do one more. And so almost like conclude a micro-budget trilogy is what we were thinking. So just as I was completing the post-production on my previous film, I started to think about some stories, and I was always pitching stories to her. I'm not a Catholic, but I've always been very spiritually motivated. I meditate, and I've gone on retreats, and I've dipped into all sorts of spiritual teachings, not Benedictine. Well, not until I worked on this film anyway. And so I really wanted to explore the idea of what would drive somebody in a modern world at university with everything ahead of them, and wealthy enough parents or middle class enough parents to support them in whatever they chose to do. What would drive somebody to give all of that completely up for a spiritual religious calling? And I started to explore the calling, what that meant, and I spoke to lots of monks and quite a few nuns, and I started reading up on the calling. And there was one thing I heard again and again and again, and I've used it 3 times in the film, which is you go in for one reason and you stay for another.
Yeah.
And I was reading extraordinary stories about the women who became nuns, and up until sort of quite recently, really, in the last 20 years or so, often women were sent to convents, either because they were pregnant, and we all know about the Magdalene sisters now, or they were poor, or often they were tithed. I don't know if anybody is aware of what tithing is.
just in case people don't know, talk about it a little bit.
The 10th child of a poor family might be given to the church of a Catholic family. I don't think that happens so much in the West, but it did happen. And I was reading all sorts of stories of women who are still alive, who'd either left or were still in convents, explaining their journey and why they became nuns. And it's very, very rare for a real extreme, tangible calling, like stigmata, for instance. Obviously, that's extraordinarily rare. So I had to incorporate that somehow. And I wanted my naughtiest nun to be the nun who had the real religious stigmata-type calling, as it were. And they do exist, apparently. According to my research, there are people who are born with stigmata.
So tell us
usually in the hands.
In the hands, but you showed
sometimes
us in the feet.
Yeah.
So in terms of your research, how did you delve into this?
Just books and books, Catholic life, going back ages in the archives, newspaper reports, anything I can get hold of. And research is kind of simpler now as well with the internet. In the olden days, I used to be a professional researcher. So in the older days, I used to go to the British Library and sit in the reading room. I don't know if anybody's ever been to the UK to study, but it used to be this amazing place that doesn't actually exist anymore. But it was a really good place to study. But now it's much easier on the internet. But I had 17 books I was referencing the whole time. But one of those books included silly stories about saints. So all of those quotes about saint names are actually factually written in books about saints. So because people became saints for the most bizarre reasons, historically speaking, hopefully they're more reasonable reasons nowadays to become a saint or to be canonized. But beneath all of this kind of weird research I was picking up on, there's also a genuine spiritual calling by a handful of young nuns who go to do something like that nowadays. And that's what I really wanted to explore, and how believable is that? But it is believable. There are young people who still do it. I think probably more so in the States actually than anywhere else. And there's very few orders that still wear the habit. And I knew that Benedictine was one of the orders that still wear habits. And some of the closed Benedictine orders wear the full habit. So mine actually had the full habit. And the guy who plays the ordaining priest at the end, he's a Benedictine monk, and he was advising us. And the nuns of Minster Abbey that I mentioned at the beginning, they actually gave us some belts, and all the crosses were actual real Benedictine crosses. So, and I found out while I was doing some research that all the Benedictine nuns, and the Dominican nuns actually, they actually sew their own wimples. So I needed the wimples to look like they were hand sewn. So if you were watching that thinking, oh, what a terrible costume, they're really dodgy wimples, actually the nuns hand sew them themselves, and they look awful, most of them, a bit wonky and gaps in them and stuff. I mean, in reality as well as in my film. So that was very important. And both Brenda and I went to the Minster Abbey, where there's these 13 nuns that still go there, and they have their 5 chants a day. Some of them are silent sessions they have as well. And we dipped into a few of those over the course of a few weeks. We just kind of drove over and went to one of the silent chants, not silent chants, we went to a silent session where there was silent prayer, meditation, and we went to some of the chants as well. They start at about 5:30 in the morning, I think is the first one. And then they go through, and they go to bed at dusk, so they get up very early and go to sleep very early.
So speaking of going with Brenda, can you talk to us a little bit about your casting process? Because you just had an opportunity to work with some of the most magnificent actresses of our time. And
so as far as the UK goes, I mean,
yeah.
I hope you kind of know who some of them were at least.
Absolutely. I mean, we had an Oscar-nominated Susanna York, which this was her
That
final
was her last
film
yeah.
as
She
well.
found out she was ill when we were working on this film, actually.
How, I just as a, we're going to get back to casting, but how did that impact the experience with all of you guys?
Well, by the time, nobody knew she was ill when we shot the film, and then I attended Cambridge Film Festival with her. It was one of the few festivals that one of the actors could actually come, but she had friends in Cambridge, so she came with me, and she told me then, and she looked really ill as well, and it was awful. And both Susanna and myself, Susanna who played Sister Ambrose, Susanna Harker, her mother was best friends with Susanna York when they were a lot younger, and so Susanna Harker was named after Susanna York. And I didn't know that when I'd cast them. I didn't know that at all. There's something else I didn't know as well. I'd cast these, well, I call them the 6 main nuns. And we all met for a coffee to have a talk, because I was going to improvise the dialogue. So when we first met, it was with the idea of improvising the dialogue, but there was so much information and gags that I wanted to incorporate that in the end I wrote it, but I only had 2 weeks to write it, so it was quite a mammoth
Wait,
job.
I'm sorry, you wrote this in 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's part of the process of the micro-budget films that I've been doing. Yeah,
Okay.
I wouldn't normally work like that, but for the process of this, it was written around the location, the budget, and in a very short period of time, a short turnaround.
And casting had obviously already
Casting
happened,
already
right?
happened when I started
So you
writing.
knew
I
who
hadn't
you
written
were
anything
writing
yet.
for.
Yeah. So Joanna Scanlon, who played Sister Kevin, I'm not sure she was very happy when she got Sister Kevin. Not only no dialogue, but
It's every actor's favorite thing.
So I think right from the get-go, I had the idea of Susanna York in my head, but various things have always happened with the micro budgets, and I don't know if it's because I meditate or because I am a very spiritual person, but I kind of free myself up to whatever's out there, and I give myself up to whatever the divine plan is, and I do this in my life generally. My friends all know this. I kind of do it all the time, and things always sort of fall into place. There's a serendipity kind of starts as you go underway, and one thing leads to another, and then all sorts of things happen. This is going to sound like I'm going off on a tangent here.
I'm going to let you go. Go for it.
I was at a film festival with my first film, and I originally thought I wanted to be an actress when I was a kid, and I was in youth theatre, which changed my life. I wasn't remotely interested in school at all, or certainly nothing academic. And I thought, well, drama would be good fun because I won't have to do any classes or learn anything or do homework and stuff. So me and my friends started doing drama. So I originally thought I wanted to be an actress, but then the school started a film club when I was about 15, and they screened a film called Walkabout, which is a Nicholas Roeg film. I don't know if people are aware of it. When I saw that film, I thought, oh my God, I want to be a director. I don't want to be an actress. And then the next film that was screened at Film Club was Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring. And that kind of sealed it.
Yeah.
And it was a secret. I didn't tell anybody until after I'd left drama school. I did end up going to drama school. After I left drama school, so I was about 15, after I left drama school, when I was 22, I slowly started to say it out loud. Because when it was like the 1970s when I decided I wanted to be a director, and I couldn't find any women at all who were directing. I was vaguely aware of an Australian director called Gillian Armstrong, because she made a film called My Brilliant Career. But I hadn't even seen the film. I couldn't even work out how I could see the film. And then slowly in America, people like Barbara Streisand started directing, and Penny Marshall, you know, so they kind of were very established when they could step in to directing. So I kept it quiet and a secret, and I come from a very working class background. Is that blue collar here? I don't know. Yeah, so I couldn't even tell my parents really. They wouldn't have known. They still don't really know what a director does. Last time I saw my dad, he said to me, when are you going to have one of those films that you go into the cinema to see? And I said, Dad, you've been to the cinema 3 times to see my films and sat in the seat and watched it on the big screen. Oh, yeah. So that's my kind of background. So I couldn't really tell anybody I wanted to be a director. Now there's a reason I'm telling you this. The reason I'm telling you this is because my first film got into a very, very important film festival, and it was one of the gala screenings. And they put me in a hotel, and as I was walking in the hotel, I thought, I'm sure that's Nicholas Roeg I just saw sitting out there. And this was my first experience of film festivals, my very, very first experience of having a film in a film festival. And I got to my room, and it's like this really smart room, and there's like a bag of goodies on the bed. I didn't realise this is what happens. And then I opened the brochure, and they were doing a Nicholas Roeg retrospective, so I thought, oh my God, it was him! So I ran back out of the hotel just to go and say hi to him, ran down the stairs, went out and just kind of said hi and threw myself on him and told him that story, that I decided to become a director when I saw Walkabout. He completely didn't believe me. But then I managed to persuade him that it was true, because I knew the film in such detail. And then I told him I had this film in the festival. And I bumped into him a few times during that festival. Now, I didn't see him again, but about, I don't know, 2 years later, I was at a friend's premiere, and I sat down in a seat, and then Nicholas Roeg came in, and he sat down in the seat next to me, and I'd given him my film when I was at the festival. I'd given him my film, and he sat down next to me and went, Jan Dunn, your film, Jippo, it's fantastic, I love it. We had a whole conversation about my film, and he'd remembered about me. And then we got to the conversation, we were saying, well, what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm trying to make this film about nuns. And he said, oh, that's a good idea. And I said, yeah, but there's a couple of actors I really want to get hold of, and it's really good if you can get hold of them without having to go through the agents. I don't suppose you'd know them. And he said, oh, who? And I said, well, Rita Tushingham. And he said, oh, I'll give you her number. So he gave me her number. He said, I'll ring her tonight, and I'll tell you you're going to ring her. And then, so that's how I got Rita Tushingham, by Nicholas Roeg saying to Rita, this girl's going to ring you, pay attention and go and see her.
Wow.
So
thank God for 15-year-old Jan Dunn. Wow, that did.
Yeah, and then I had another film festival. I was screening my last film, and that was at Cambridge Film Festival actually. And Susanna York was going to be there to do a talk on a film that was screening that she was in. But I was leaving on the 3 o'clock train or something, and she was arriving on the 4 o'clock train. So, and I found out she was going to be there, and I said to the programme, oh my God, I really, really want Susanna York to play the prioress in my next film. It's about nuns. And the programmer said, that's a great idea, she'll be brilliant. She said, write her a note, and I'll big you up, and I'll give the notes to her. So I wrote this really long, handwritten, scribbled message to Susanna York, telling her how fantastic I thought she was, blah, blah, blah. And left it for her, gushing, with my phone numbers and everything. And that evening I got a phone call. Hello! Straight away I knew it was Susanna York on the phone. So it had this whole conversation about the prioress and melodrama and Black Narcissus and stuff. So, and things like that kept happening.
So it was a fairly non-traditional casting process, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, because I used to be an actress a long time ago, so I know quite a few actors, and there's always a route to try and get to them, which is always good. If you have to go to the agents, you've got a 50-50 chance. They may not even read it because the agents will read it first. And being on this side of it, I understand why the agents do that, why they vet stuff first. So I do get that.
So how were you pitching it? Because you didn't even have a script at this point.
No. Yeah. It was a girl who has a calling, and it's the discovery of that, and the discovery of the strange behaviour of nuns when they're enclosed together in a closed order and they don't speak. And nuns, actually, the nuns in Minster, which was the inspiration for this, it is actually a silent order. And this was something I didn't realise until I went there as well. I went to the wrong door when I went to go and have a talk to them. I went to the wrong door and pulled this bell. They had a big bell. Pulled this bell. But as I was walking up to the door, I could hear all this raucous laughter coming from inside. Women's voices, screeching, laughing. And I thought, no, maybe they've got people doing a tour in here or something. And then I rang this bell and it all went quiet. And then 3 of them came to the door and said to me, oh, you can't come in this way, you've got to go around the back and everything. So I had to go around the back. The same nuns came to the back door. So I go all the way around to the back. And there was one nun who was very much like Sister Hilda, who said, no, I don't talk to the media. I said, I'm not media, I'm a screenwriter and I've got an idea for a story. I don't talk to the media. She just had this thing in her head that I was the media. So I eventually kind of managed to sit down with one of them and have a chat, and they told me about the silence. The silence is, it's most of the day, but at certain times of the day they have recreational hours. Every day they have recreational hours. So in my head, the film is set around the recreational hours when they're, out and about and able to talk.
So at what part in the process, once you've got everybody cast, there was a switch with Emily, correct?
Yeah, the very, very last minute. It was like less than 2 weeks before we shot. We lost an actress who was cast because she got a bigger job and the agent pulled her, which is fair enough. And I kind of said, yeah, she should do that. It's one of the few times I've actually called upon a casting director, because casting directors are brilliant, but they're expensive, and they might do some favours, but the favours I've been using up with the casting director, I always kind of employed them on a budget line when we actually get to contracts and securing actors and stuff like that. But this particular casting director, because I've been using her a few times, she got somebody that she thought I should meet who'd be a very good replacement for the person I had. And so that's how I met Emily. Emily wouldn't have been in the picture at all if it hadn't been for a good old-fashioned casting director. So I do use the traditional route sometimes as well.
Right. That's amazing. And once you got everybody in, we were just speaking about Emily Beecham, who plays Joanna. Once you got everybody in, what was the transition from thinking that it was going to be improvised to figuring out, oh, no, there needs to be an actual text?
Well, I cast them about 6 weeks before, 6-7 weeks, something like that. And we were planning on shooting, I think, like in the September or something. But then Brenda Blethyn had a window that we had to use her in, and her window was 2 weeks. She had a 2-week window for a low-budget film. I mean, we paid her properly within the budget, but she only had a 2-week window. And I told all the other actresses, and they totally get this. They do understand that. The only person who's potentially going to sell the poster and sell the film, although she's not in your poster, sell the film will be Brenda Blethyn. They do understand that, and their respective agents all understand that as well. So we shifted around. I mean, my line producer's up there somewhere. I'm sure Fanny remembers all this. We shifted around all the dates, and it all happened very quickly. So everything was happening at very quick notice, and so my window to write the script as well, and I'd already started the improvised dialogue script anyway, so it's a 55-page what I call blueprint, which is what I'd used on the other film. So it's kind of a blueprint that's written in prose, but I really needed to, there was so much religious information that I had to incorporate, and lines that I mean, usually in my prose I can put some gags in there and they're picked up by the actors, but it was more than that on this, and there was a journey that she had to make and stuff. And also I wanted the outside and the inside of the convent to be very different, and you can only do that if you shape it properly. So, well, as properly as I could in 2 weeks. So, but I'd already got all the research was under my belt and everything. And Sister Ignatius is actually based on a real character, who you might know because she's an American nun. She's a naughty nun. And her name is Joan Chittister. I don't know if anybody knows of Joan Chittister. She's quite a famous nun in nun world. But she was threatened with being, what is it called when they excommunicated. She was threatened with being excommunicated by the Vatican if she was to attend the first ever conference in Dublin for the ordination of women. Not only did she attend it, she ended up chairing it, and 147 nuns from her diocese wrote to the Vatican and said, if you chuck her out from the church, then we're going as well. So she's quite defiant. I believe she's still defiant. She's written a few books as well and stuff. And the other one, it's sort of a combo between her and there's a nun I found out about who lives in the slums of Brazil, in her community, her convent community in the slums of Brazil. And she's been known to accompany prostitutes to abortions before. So she's a really naughty nun as well. And the campaign for accountability is a real campaign that was running a few years ago, which was a campaign that Catholics, particularly women, and Amnesty International and a group of other people were running, which was about the accountability of the church for the priests in Africa who'd started to rape nuns so that they wouldn't get AIDS from the village girls who they would normally have sex with. And the Vatican was doing nothing about it. So that's a real campaign as well. So my subtext in there is a whole load of kind of feminist polemic as well. But I do like naughty nuns, because naughty nuns are usually the ones that get things done.
I think we find that a lot in the entire world. Just in that bent, because there is such a wonderful feminist feel to this, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about what it is now to be sort of out and proud as a female director. You know, it was something you didn't want to say or claim for a while, and now you've got this sort of trilogy of the micro budgets.
Yeah,
you've got your new work coming up.
It's funny because I it's really strange because I don't know if I'd ever call myself a woman director. You know, I've got friends like Paul Andrew Williams who can call himself a man director. I don't really think of myself as a woman director. I know that's awful, and I have been on the board of Women in Film and Television, and it always used to astound me when they go on and on and on about women directors. And I just think, well, we're actually directors. You know, we're directors who have joined an organisation.
Absolutely.
And you know, there's so few women in the UK who are getting their films financed, so few. And I mean, we kind of all know each other. We're pretty much, I mean, half a dozen of us really. I'm talking about people who get film directors. And it's really hard to get into TV as well. I don't know what it's like here. And I don't know what the answer is, because, you know, some of us have achieved a lot more than our male counterparts who are soaring past us. And all I put it down to myself is that personally, I read scripts completely differently to my male friends. I watch films completely differently to them. I have a different cinema experience watching a film. And also, you know, just because I'm a girl doesn't mean I want to watch rom-coms all the time. You know, I love a good action movie. And, I mean, you've got Catherine Bigelow, at least, who's breaking the
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just...
Well, it seems to come down to point of view. And whomever you are, whatever gender you are, you bring that to your work.
I agree, yeah. I think that's what it is. I mean, Almodovar never says he's a gay filmmaker, but everything is kind of measured with his taste and what he brings to that. All of his observations are going to be coloured by that.
Right. Absolutely. So, can you tell us what you're working on now?
Yeah, I've got a handful of projects in development. We're hoping to shoot in the summer a Rose Tremaine adaptation, which I've adapted. And Rose Tremaine, I don't know if she's so well known here. She's a very, very established novelist in the UK, my favourite novelist. So I was really glad when she said yes to Sacred Country, and Sacred Country is the novel. So I've adapted that, and hopefully we're shooting it in April. Casting it at the moment, the traditional way. So I have to go through agents and things. But it's a proper budget. I mean, it's not high, but it's a low budget, but not micro budget.
Right.
Hopefully it's the kind of that will get me on the radar, maybe. So
There seems to be plenty of support out here for it.
but we're still looking for some of the finances, the same old thing. So, but it's a best-selling novel. It's going to be a great cast. I can't tell you who, but it is going to be a great cast. I've got some exciting people lined up for that. And I've just got an option on another novel, which is called Year of Wonders, which is set during the Great Plague. And it's actually it's a fictionalised story of a small village in Sheffield which quarantined itself when the plague hit the village so it wouldn't spread further north.
Yeah.
And what started out with 288 members, 288 families, there were only 8 families left by the end, but it hadn't spread further north. So it was a sacrifice they made, and it's a fictionalised story of what may have happened with people's relationships, and witchcraft, bribery, violence, relationships exploding. It's a beautifully written book, and it's quite extraordinary. So I'm really glad I've got it. It's a mammoth task, and I've just started it. So.
It's so exciting. I'd love to open up to a few questions out in the audience. I'm going to do my best to see out here. Does anyone have any questions for Jan? I can't tell. I do see one waving hand. Billy, is that you?
Yes.
Great, brilliant.
Well, first off, as a director, I love your work. I'm not looking at women or men. As a director, I love your work. As a writer, I love your work, and as a producer, you're amazing. How in the world did you come up with such a great story in 2 weeks?
Well, my first feature film I wrote in 2 days.
Wow.
That was made as a calling card though, so I didn't expect what happened for that to happen. Yeah, Jipper. And then the second one was about 2 weeks as well, but the second one was improvised dialogue. I wouldn't choose to write like that is the answer. It's not really how I write a script. I call them kind of creative exercises really. They're very creative endeavours. I'm a huge, I love structure, and I'm a huge believer in the beginning, a middle and an end. And I'm always surprised when you see so many films coming out that kind of don't really have an end to them. I mean, it doesn't need to be all nicely, neatly tied up with a bow like that was, and my last one was. My first one wasn't particularly. But I think it needs to have, even if nothing happens. I mean, I love the straight story, and when nothing happens, and it's a lovely film. Films like that, I don't mind if nothing happens, as long as there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's a journey for the audience to be taken on. Too much is going on in the calling, I think, and there's loads of things I couldn't really explore as much as I would have liked to have done. That's what I would have done if I'd had the time to write, to probably explore lots of little bits. And I had loads of stuff on the page, like I had a tractor that the prioress was getting on to mow the lawn and getting everybody to get out of the way, and there was all sorts of little bits and bobs, tiny bits, like Sister Gertrude. Rita Tushingham is a Liverpool football fan, by the way. And any of you who know about Liverpool, I know there were some in the audience whose voices I could hear acknowledging the anthem to the song that Liverpool are known for from Carousel. I haven't been sued by Rodgers and Hammerstein yet, and I didn't clear it. I did actually ask the lawyers if I needed to clear it. And he said, "Oh, don't bother." But he said it in such a way that nobody's going to see your film, Jan, so I wouldn't bother. Hopefully we're going to change that. But it's also apparently it's because she spoke the words, she didn't actually sing them.
Right.
So, but it's so famously an anthem
lyrics
for the Liverpool football team. Everybody knows it's from Carousel. So I also had Sister Gertrude was going to be knitting some Liverpool scarves as you walk past her cell. Now, I don't know if anybody's aware of a film called A Taste of Honey, which is it was a seminal film in the 60s which launched Rita. She was only 17 at the time. It launched Rita. And there was an actress in that called Dora Bryan who played her mother. And Dora Bryan is very, very famous in the UK, but at the time that we shot the film, she was 85. We also cast Dora, and Dora was going to be playing one of the old nuns. I was just going to have her sitting in a corridor or just in the scene somewhere. And I didn't tell anybody, and I didn't tell Rita. But actually, the day that she turned up, she was ill, and we had to drive her back home again. And I never told Rita that until long after we'd shot the film. And it would have been amazing if we could have had her there as well. Yeah, that would have been really good.
Really sweet.
And I had a whole lineup of other actresses, if any of them had said no. mean, there's people I was going to go to, Claire Bloom, I don't know if you know who Claire Bloom is, Wendy Craig, you know, they were just kind of amazing actresses I was thinking who are going to be maybe up for it.
It was a graced set. Let's be honest
Yeah.
there. It really was. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead and shout it out.
Could you share with us a little bit about how your writing process during that 2 weeks? I mean, do you write all day? Do you write at night? Do you write in the morning? How does that go for you?
No, well, I think with that it was just, I had to put the time by because I hadn't got around to writing it yet, and this time was coming in because of Brenda's window, so I just had to force myself to just, I'd kind of written a very loose blueprint. I actually shot the blueprint, what I call the blueprint, with Jippo and Ruby Blue, my first 2 films. I actually shot the blueprint, and it was a bit more than that. I mean, a bit less than that. It was kind of just a shadow, I suppose, kind of a shadow of what I wanted, sitting with all my research books on the desk with me, and dipping in and out of them all the time, and then suddenly think of something else and start doing a bit of research on the internet. So it really was a kind of a very, 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 not even an outline really, and that had already been done. So when I knew I had to write the script, I just had to do it. So
you just locked yourself up for 2
yeah, I
weeks?
just wrote it. just went for it. Yeah, I'm not one of those people. I can't write like in that sort of romantic way of you're writing all through the night and you don't eat and stuff like that. I have a dog. I have to go out for a walk, and I like going out for a walk when I'm writing. I like eating. I like eating too much. So I'm not one of those who just go and lock myself in a room anywhere. I get up by 7. I'm usually on the computer, and I've started writing, and I'll plan to write so many scenes usually, because I have a rough idea of how long the scene's going to be. So I'll just kind of plan, or by lunchtime I've got to there, and usually it works that way, more or less. I mean, there'll be typos, and it'll be in a bit of right old mess, and I won't necessarily have scene headings. It'll be much more about dialogue, or an essence of what the scene's about, really, and then just slowly bring it together. But yeah, it was
That's
tricky.
great. That's great.
Can I tell you something else about the nuns? Sorry. I was going to tell you something else about the casting. When I sat them all together at the same time, and I had never asked any of them this, I said, okay, which one of you, have any of you been to a convent school? And they'd all been to convent schools. I didn't go to a convent school, I wasn't taught by nuns. They were all taught by nuns, and they'd all been to convent schools. And not everybody has in the UK. It's not that common. So that was a pretty amazing one of those moments again as well.
That's outstanding. I think I saw a question down here. Yes.
I was wondering if there are any other locations outside of the UK that you'd like to direct. Is there anything you've ever thought, like, I want to direct in Africa or
Well,
Greece or...
There's something I've started reading again at the moment, and the first time I read it I thought, oh, I'd really like to direct that. And it's another Rose Tremaine novel, and it's set in New Zealand. And I love New Zealand, and it's a very poetic piece, but it needs money. It needs money. It needs money. Most of the stuff that I would choose to shoot on a location usually needs money.
Mm-hmm.
I've got an idea. We're really into Danish thrillers in the UK. I've got an idea for a Danish thriller at the moment that I'd like to write with my Danish friend. But I'm thinking it will probably end up a TV series, because we watch all their TV series, like The Killing. You get them translated into American, don't you? You have the American version of The Bridge. Do you have American version of The Bridge, of The Killing?
Yeah.
You probably haven't got Borgen though, I would have thought. You couldn't translate that into American.
Not yet.
Not yet. They'll
Watch
find a
the
way.
originals.
I see one more hand. Yep, I see it.
Brilliant film. I love your writing, directing, and the whole production was just stellar. Could you explain a little bit about your approach in directing? Brenda Blethyn is one of my favorites, and how much that you allowed improvisation, what they would take, and what your latitude is.
On 2 weeks. What would you think? Is what I was saying.
Brilliant story, though.
One take is the answer.
Wow.
And when I worked with Bob Hoskins on Ruby Blue, he loved it because he calls himself One Take Bob.
Yeah.
So, but although my line producer Franny is up there somewhere, she will tell you how frantic shooting at that pace is and how mad and insane it is. But and I say one take. Sometimes with the children, obviously, I'll go a bit further, and with the less experienced actors, I might go a bit further. And my producer used to say to me, "Oh, but that's fantastic that you've got someone like Brenda Blethyn, because you only need one take." And I think, no, the whole thing about having someone like Brenda Blethyn there is you really want to work on it and have a great time working on it. But the good thing is Brenda lives near me, so we did actually have a few sessions together. I went to Susanna York's house a few times. We had a few sessions together. And Pauline McLean's a very, very good friend of mine, and we were on the phone a lot. But rehearsal is out of the question. I mean, even if you got budget, rehearsal is out of the question. But we didn't really have a rehearsal. But we had a very long day's read through with everybody, and then the next day we hired a room for 2 days. Then the next day we had the guy who specialised in the spiritual Catholic chants, and he put them all, of himself singing them, he put them all onto tape, so they all had MP3s in their ears with the thing going on, not when we're shooting. Although I think Jo Scanlon said to me that she had it in her ear and she was singing along to it under her habit because nobody knew, but I'm not sure whether she was actually joking or she meant that. There's not really enough time to rehearse. I would love that, but I think even some of the bigger pictures don't really rehearse so much, as far as I'm aware, but they don't do one take. If I do one take, then I can shoot several angles. So it's usually not literally one take. It means I've got something to cut within the edit suite. If I've only done one take of that angle, then I could do one take of the other. So there's a few choices for the edit. Improvised dialogue is difficult with the edit, but if Emma, my editor, was here, I'm sure she can tell you what headaches
which
she
she
had.
shared quite a bit on our Twitter chat. We are doing another Twitter chat actually with Jan tomorrow. It's going to be happening around 1 p.m. And so I encourage all of you guys to follow. It's hashtag FFFchat or hashtag FFFcalling. And it was great, the last Twitter chat, because Emma was on there talking about the difficulty of editing an improvised entire feature.
I think Harriet dipped in as well.
Harriet did dip in. She was absolutely a part of it. So it's really fun. You never know who's going to show up from the cast and crew on the Twitter chat. So it's a great way to continue this conversation. I know this evening is starting to get a bit late, so unfortunately I'm going to wrap it up, but I really invite you guys to continue the conversation with us over at the JW Marriott, where we're all going to be headed afterwards to have a little bit of a cocktail, maybe some water, a refresher, whatever, maybe a nosh. And that's a chance for us all to chat for a bit more about this experience. The thing about films like this is that they are really only in existence beyond where they've been because of you. If you loved this film, if you had thoughts about this film, please talk to people about it. It's word of mouth that gets these films off the ground. We have another screening that's happening tomorrow night at the Lemley in NoHo. It's right on Lancashire. The screening time is 7:30 p.m. You can also send people to our website, which is filmfestivalflix.com, where they can already download it, they can stream it. It is available for people across the United States to see this film. And you guys saw how great the work is. Mm-hmm. It's something that we want to get out there, right? It's just too brilliant not to be seen. The other thing is because we have Jan with us and we already have the DVDs, we do have some DVDs for sale tonight. If you'd like to purchase one to have her autograph them, they are available and she's here with it, which is kind of exciting.
Even more worth.
I know, they're going to be so worth it, not worthless, lady. Come on now. But truthfully...
I wonder what my signature on eBay would be worth today and what it would be worth after the roast Tremaine has been and after the next one. And
it's going to grow and grow and grow. It's so exciting. This is the dream. We're living it right here, right now. You're at the start. Well, 3 films in, but you know what I mean. It was an absolute pleasure having you guys here. Check in with us on Facebook and Twitter. And in the meantime, just right across the street at the JW Marriott, please come to join. Thank you. And thanks again to Jan.